At 18 years old, Elmer Daniels was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison for rape he says he didn't commit. It was an all-white judge, all-white jury. He is now 56 years old and has been in jail for 39 years. His attorney appealed his conviction based on flawed testimony that he says proves his client was wrongfully convicted. All right, folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment. We want you to write this website down, marijuanastock.org, marijuanastock.org. And so here's why. As we transition into the holiday season, this is the time, of course, when we start thinking about giving and sharing. And sometimes the best gift can be something you give someone, which is an opportunity that can potentially change their lives. That's why our friends at Transatlantic Real Estate have created an investment opportunity for the everyday investor. It involves legal marijuana and crowdfunding. Now, we all know that legal marijuana has created one of the fastest growing industries in the nation, a multi-billion-dollar industry. We also know that crowdfunding makes it easier to be an early investor of an opportunity, but it gets easier. Transatlantic Real Estate is different. They have a business model that is simple to understand. What they're going to do is they buy land that supports marijuana grow operations and lease it to licensed high-paying tenants. Now, what that means is you're investing in the landlord of a licensed marijuana farm in a high-growth market. Now, you can invest little as $300 up to $10,000 before the company goes public. And here's the piece. They have recently extended the offer, which means you still have time if you take action now. Now, keep in mind, you must complete and confirm your application to participate, so be sure to complete the process. Now, look, don't spend all of your money over the holidays and end up with empty pockets. Instead, get a return on your investment. You can also consider making this an investment for someone special. To get started, go to marijuanastock.org, marijuanastock.org. If you want to get in the game, you can do it now. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered. Attorney Emeka Igwegwe joins me now to give us the status of this case. Emeka, how you doing?
Hi, Roland. How you doing?
So he's saying, I didn't do it. He's been in jail for 39 years. What are you presenting to show that he did not commit this crime?
Well, first of all, Roland, got me on your show. Your viewers should know that at the age of 18, my client, Elmer Daniels, was given a life sentence for a crime he didn't commit. It's important to know that he's not getting off on a technicality. He's getting out because he's actually innocent. He had a strong alibi at the time of trial. We know that the state's key witness, a 15-year-old, lied on several occasions, and only when that witness was threatened with being charged with the rape because he himself was a suspect, did he finally mention the name of my client, Elmer. We obtained transcripts of our client that show that he was not in the same math class as the state's key witness, contrary to what he told the police. He said he knew that was the rape because they were in the same 8th grade math class together. Now, you would think the prosecuting attorney would obtain the transcripts of my client, or his defense attorney would have obtained the transcripts as well, too. Unfortunately, neither one of them did, and Esther Klein was convicted. We know from the statements of the witness of the rape victim that my client did not match the description. She said my client had a broad nose and my client has a narrow nose. She said my client had bitten fingernails all the way to the cuticles, and a court-appointed psychiatrist who looked and examined Mr. Daniels was prepared to testify to the judge that my client's fingernails had never been habitually bitten. So I'm just giving you a small example of all the evidence that didn't come out on trial that proves my client was, in fact, actually innocent.
And so you said you also have some very important news you wanted to share. What is that?
So today, on his 57th birthday, the judge signed the order to dismiss the indictment against Mr. Daniels, and within the next 48 hours, Mr. Daniels, after being in jail for 39 years for a crime he did not commit, is going to be released within the next 48 hours. So what a birthday present. On his 57th birthday, he gets the news that the judge has agreed to dismiss the indictment against him.
First of all, where did this take
and overturn his conviction.
Where did this take place?
This took place in the state of Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware, to be more specific.
And so with the judge signing this order, Will he be released? And when will that? So explain that process.
So the background was we've been working on this case for over 2.5 years, and the state of Delaware has resisted our efforts throughout the course of this last 2.5 years. When we finally presented them with evidence, and the key piece of evidence was when we got the transcripts, we noticed that there was a special agent from the FBI named Michael P. Malone. And Michael P. Malone was a hair forensic expert of the FBI who went around the whole country, testified in thousands of cases throughout the country, that he could, by examining hair, determine who the hair belonged to. So in Mr. Daniels' case, he testified to the jury falsely, as it would turn out, that hair found on the victim's underwear belonged to my client Elmer Daniels, and hair found on pants belonging to Mr. Daniels belonged to the victim. And when we got involved, we requested that the FBI and the United States Department of Justice review the transcripts of Mr. Daniel, specifically regarding Special Agent Malone's testimony. When they conducted that review, they wrote back to the Attorney General of Delaware that they admit in this particular case, this agent testified falsely. And as a result, they requested that the Delaware Department of Justice consider dismissing or consider reviewing this case in light of the false testimony. And despite us presenting that to them and other discrepancies in this case, the Delaware Department of Justice refused to release Mr. Daniels. They, in light of the discrepancies, they offered us a commutation, which means Mr. Daniels' sentence would have been lessened, and he would have come out of jail, but he would still have been a convicted sex offender and would have had to register as a convicted sex offender under Megan's law. We refused because my client is innocent. They then offered a pardon to support a pardon application to the governor, and once again, my client refused because he's maintained his innocence for 39 years. So finally, when we gave them the transcripts that showed their key witness lied by stating that he recognized it was my client who committed the rape because they were in the same 8th grade math class together, that was the final straw that where the state of Delaware realized they had no choice, and they're the ones that filed the motion to dismiss the indictment against my client and to overturn his conviction. We, of course, filed a response saying that we concur that the indictment should be dismissed, and the final thing that needed to occurred today when the judge signed off on the order dismissing the indictment against Mr. Daniels and overturning his conviction.
So when is he going to be out?
That's the million-dollar question. We expect Mr. Daniels to be released within the next 48 hours. The prison needs to process his paperwork, but within the next 48 hours, Mr. Daniels, for the first time in 39 long years, will be able to walk the street without the stigma of being a convicted sex offender. He'll be able to celebrate Christmas with his mother, who is still alive. She's in the 80s, and his mother has waited for 39 years to celebrate Christmas with her son.
We'll love for this to happen, Emeka, when he is released. We'd love to have both of you back on the show to talk to him about his fight for freedom and how he never gave up on his innocence.
We would love to, Roland. Thank you for the opportunity to tell your audience about this case.
I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Quickly, I want to go to our panel. We saw in Texas when Craig Watkins was the first black elected DA in Texas, how he created this division to retest a bunch of different cases of DNA, and probably more than 30 people actually have been released, and they've actually made that as a mainstay in that office. We've seen other progressive DAs do this. The worst thing in the world, I think, is when you have prosecutors who refuse, in their quest to believe they're never wrong, how they will stand by wrongful convictions because they don't want to say we screwed up. And the biggest problem for me is that you don't have the kind of backlash against prosecutors who withhold evidence, who lie, who knowingly will allow cops or other witnesses to lie, and nothing happens to their careers. And that's just one of those things that I think if you're a prosecutor, not only should you no longer be a prosecutor, you should lose your law license if you had a part in somebody going to prison who didn't do it. Corey.
Well, I will say this type of case, and I'm so glad to hear Mr. Daniels is getting out, but this type of case is actually why my opinion on the death penalty changed. I used to be pro-death penalty because I think from an emotional standpoint, it's easy to say when you know for sure someone has done something, okay, you want that retribution. However, this is so common. You mentioned the situation in Texas where they retest, and I think that should be implemented.
And many of them were on death row.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point, is that as someone who is generally skeptical of government power, and especially as it pertains to marginalized communities, people who can't afford a good lawyer, people who, quite frankly, are in a system where the public defenders might be more, in line with the prosecutors. You see this all the time with inadequate, representation for people. So I would say we need to keep doing more of this as a society. I think it's very important for these cases to be publicized and brought to light so people understand how critical it is to look at all the evidence anew and for people to look at these cases from 39 years ago. It's crazy. So I say no death penalty, and let's look at these cases.
I agree, and I support the testing that you raised, Roland. I'm sure you're familiar with Barry Scheck's Innocence Project.
Yep.
And how that project, through DNA, has released lots of people, particularly black men, in droves who have been found to be not even at the scene. There's no forensic evidence. And because they were black, they were easy to convict. One of the things that's easier than melting water or ice in sun is convicting somebody black of a crime. And I'm glad that these situations are bring themselves forth, because this is a biased society when it comes to law enforcement. And here we go again. But in Daniels' case, Mr. Daniels' case, he was released, and that feels good.
Roland, I chair the board of Push Excel, which is Reverend Jackson's educational arm. We've got a staffer in Chicago, Johnny Savory, who was convicted at age 14 of a rape that he did not commit. His mother maintained his pace at the dinner table for over 30 years, had his plate sitting there for over 30 years. And so I'm relating to this case, thinking about how important the family support is, how important that family faith is. I mean, Johnny didn't do it. They finally figured out that he didn't do it, and he was let out. But this man was in jail for more than 30 years for something he did not do, that he was convicted
39 years
at age 14. So this man is the same kind of thing.
Right.
And so props to his mom and props to his community, because we know that without that community support, these brothers and sisters, we have sisters who are wrongfully convicted as well, they lose faith. And losing faith causes them to do a certain kind of acting out inside the system.
But also, he could have gotten the sentence reduced. But he said, I did not do this.
Precisely.
He was willing to stay in prison.
He refused to admit to something that he did not do. And I think
big.
that's very pivotal and very critical. And what we know is that this just keeps happening to black people. And you're right. They should lose their licenses. I mean, they should be put up under jail. You got somebody who's been in jail for 39 years because of your BS? Look at the Central Park 5. Those DAs still do not admit
and are still defending it. And are still defending it. And one of them is a law professor, I think at Columbia or one of those schools. I don't know how in the hell. I don't know how in the hell.
Y'all's president of the United States.
I don't know how in the hell. I don't know how in the hell she teaching anybody. All right, y'all.